high in the layered winds, where no map could hold steady, where sunlight bent slightly, and time itself slowed to a thoughtful drift, there floated a city called Driyan's reach. It did not stand on earth, nor did it cling to the clouds. Instead, it hovered gently in the slipstream of old skies, tethered by ancient currents only the oldest navigators could name. Driyan's reach was built on the backs of massive, sleeping platforms called aerocells, thick woven structures that flexed with the breath of the wind, holding streets, spires, and softly glowing homes like petals resting in a cupped hand. Everything moved slowly here. Not just because of the altitude, but because the people of Driyan had learned to honor stillness. They walked without hurry. They spoke with measured grace. They watched the motion of air as if it were a form of timekeeping. And each household had a wind clock, a softly turning sculpture that told the hour not with ticks, but with sways. It was a city without alarms, without footfalls, without urgency. And at its center lived a young caretaker named Ilia. Ilia was neither known nor unknown in Driyan's reach. She kept the records of motion, those written not in ink but in the dance of cloth, the slow spin of thread, and the shifting of sails. She worked from a high observatory chamber that rose like a soft spiral above the others, where she could look out and see the way the world turned. Not in revolutions, but in the slow agreement between wind and fabric. She never rushed, she didn't need to. Until the morning, a panel in her observatory moved on. Its own end revealed a long-forgotten door, one that hadn't been opened in years. Asterisk, the panel hadn't been designed to open. Not recently. It was part of the observatory's inner wall's decorative, woven with memory thread and translucent silk. But on this quiet morning, as Ilia adjusted the curvature of a sky reflector, it had shifted with a subtle creak, curling slightly outward. Behind it lay a frame of soft copper and polished wood, and within the frame a door. Ilia stared. She approached without fear, laying her palm gently against the center of the panel. The air around it was still, almost thoughtful, like the pause between turning a page and beginning to read. She did not open the door at once. Instead, she retrieved a thin sliver of thread from her desk, a windry quarter, and held it near the seam. If air moved, even slightly, it would catch in the thread. And it did. A whisper of breath. Not a draft. Not a leak, but a pulse. Ilia opened the door. It led not downward or across, but inward into a chamber that had no place in the towers. design. A spherical room, perfectly round. The walls were polished to a soft shimmer. The floor smooth as still water. In the center floated a large vessel of layered glass, shaped like a cocoon. Inside, a windform, a creature of air and song, sleeping. Ilia knew the stories. Long ago, Driyan's Rich had kept the last windformer, rare, being said to contain the memory of sky, a living remnant of the ancient currents. They were thought extinct, but here one was resting in glass, slow of breath, suspended in a slumber of centuries. She didn't touch it. Instead, she sat on the floor beside the vessel and watched. Hours passed, and with each, the wind outside grew quieter. Ilia began visiting the chamber daily. She said nothing, brought nothing, changed nothing. She simply sat. And each time, the air around the cocoon shifted more subtly, like someone dreaming in response to a nearby voice. These sails outside adjusted slowly to the change, tugging slightly at their moorings, curving their edges with new tension. The sky clocks spun differently. People noticed. "Have you felt it?" asked a shopkeeper as Ilia passed. The pause before movement, the baker said. "My tea cools faster, but the steam moves slower." Even the children grew still mid-play, glancing upward at the wind patterns as if they heard music too low for adults. And still, Ilia said nothing. Until the day she entered the hidden room and the windform's cocoon was open. Not shattered, just unsealed. The chamber had shifted with its walls slightly convex, ceiling brighter, the floor gathering a trace of air that wasn't there before, and the windform was no longer inside. It floated gently now, just above the glass, its shape soft and ever-changing, sometimes the outline of wings, sometimes the stretch of a bird's neck, sometimes just a curl of mist that hummed with breath. It was awake. Ilia felt no fear. Instead, she bowed. The windform did not speak, but it responded. With a ripple of air that encircled her like a calm tide returning to shore. And for the first time in her life, Ilia heard a word without voice. Soon, life in Driyan's Reach began to shift, not abruptly, but with the careful grace of a silk curtain unfurling. The city had always moved gently, but now its stillness held weight, as if the air itself had learned to breathe with a different kind of rhythm. Ilia noticed it first in the sails, each one a wide tapestry of fabric stretched across the open air. adjusted without commensably altering its angle, catching new pockets of breeze. The sound of the wind brushing past was no longer a hush, but a hum, like something remembering how to sing. The people, too, began to behave differently. Children no longer ran, at least not all the time. They drifted like leaves in airplay, tracing soft spirals in the plazas, laughing with breathy tones as they chased shadows that seemed to change direction on their own. Artisans took to creating without plans. They etched flowing, fluid shapes into their glass. Musicians sat at the edges of wind tunnels with instruments they hadn't played in years, simply letting their strings flutter until something like melody formed. And always, Ilia returned to the hidden chamber. Each time, the windform responded more vividly. One day, it shimmered with the arch of a bird mid-glide. Another, it took the subtle form of a curled shell, spinning slowly in place. Once, it hovered just inches from her face, imitating her, breath slowing and deepening until her whole body relaxed without meaning to. She began bringing gifts, not offerings, just quiet things. A single curl of paper she'd written a memory on, a pebble from the observatory roof, warmed by sun, a silk ribbon that had caught in her sleeve, left floating in the air beside the cocoon. The windform accepted each one wordlessly, absorbing them into its light. And though it never made a sound, Ilia began to hear it. Not in her ears, but somewhere deep behind her sternum, a tone that responded to mood, to memory, to movement that the tone never demanded. It waited, it understood. And on the 97th morning since the door first opened, as Ilia stepped into the chamber with a new braid of thread in her hand, the windform changed again. It rose higher, stretched wider. Its light grew cool and faintly blue. Its form began to ripple like water caught in moonlight. And in that moment, the space between them shifted. She felt it. An invitation. The city was listening, and the sky was beginning to lean in. That night, under the slow drift of stars and the pale shimmer of the twin moons, Ilia climbed the topmost tier of the observatoria platform few ever used, built only for wind calibration and dream study. Above her, the night pulsed with quiet. The sails below twisted ever so slightly, drawing in the currents as if holding their breath. The glass domes of the homes shimmered like lanterns caught mid-blink, and in the center of the sky, drifting slow as thought, came the wind. Form, it rose beside her without sound, unfurling like a ribbon from the world's deepest stream. It had no edges, no core, yet it was complete. Its glow was neither gold nor blue, but a tone between the two, something that shimmered like old lullabies and felt like being remembered. Ilia stepped toward it. The windform shifted shape once again, that open ring, pulsing gently. This time, though, the center drew inward slightly, like breath preparing to speak. The air around it quivered, not with pressure, but anticipation. And so, she stepped through, not over, not past, but through the ring itself. Time softened, the stars blinked slower. Her heartbeat became the only rhythm in the world, and even that began to match the windform's glow dot. And then the tone dot, it began as the tiniest tremble, like the inside of a seashell catching memory. Then it expanded. It didn't push against the world, it wrapped around it, a tone made not of music, but of recognition. It passed through Driyan's reach, like a ripple of warmth on skin. People looked up from windows and terraces. Some stood, some closed their eyes. Others placed a hand to their chest, unsure why. They all heard the same truth, not in language, but in feeling. You are part of the air that waits, part of the wind that remembers. You are allowed to be still, and you are allowed to move. The tone faded not into silence, but into space, a breath left open. And as it did, the windform curled upward, not leaving, but ascending. A slow spiral into the thin band of atmosphere above Driyan's reach, where the stars watched with gentle patience. Ilia stood beneath it, her face lifted, not in sorrow, nor in triumph, just in presence. The sails shifted again. The bells on the outer edges of the city chimed once, not loud, but perfectly timed. A tone of acceptance, and all of Driyan's reach exhaled. In the days that followed, the chamber remained open. People visited it, sat, breathed, brought feathers, notes, sketches. The windform never returned visibly, but the air had changed permanently. It lingered, in doorways, on cheeks, in the curves of dreams. Stillness was no longer just a habit in Driyan's reach. It was a language. And every night, as the stars turned slowly overhead, the city slept, knowing that somewhere in the breath between wind and waiting, the silence was singing.